I'm Harlen Wheatley. I'm the Master Distiller here at Buffalo Trace Distillery. Well, I was born in Mount Sterling, Kentucky, and I went to school in northern Kentucky in Boone County. And when I was at Boone County, my toughest subject in school was chemistry. And I really couldn't figure it out and whatever. And so one of the things I figured out was I, of course, wanted to go to college and I wanted to make a little money. And when I looked at the list of things to, study and major in, as a personal challenge, I chose chemistry. It was just kind of my makeup, that I didn't like the fact, I'm a little competitive, so I didn't like the fact that I had trouble with chemistry. And I knew that chemists, I had a couple uncles who worked as chemists in Tennessee, and it was something that interested me and I wanted to learn. So I started studying chemistry in college and at Northern Kentucky. And one of the things I quickly figured out is chemists didn't make a whole lot of money, and I didn't want to be in the lab all the time. So I looked at my options, and I looked at the pay scales, and basically chemical engineers made a lot more money than most engineers, and interest me a lot. So I transferred to University of Kentucky and started my chemical engineering degree and got that degree. And as I was studying chemistry and chemical engineering in Kentucky, I learned about the bourbon industry. And so in 1994, 93, when I was learning about the industry, it was all about the history, because back then the industry wasn't anything like it is today. It was a business that was barely making it, and there was not a lot of people drinking bourbon back then. There was a lot of different competition out there, and we were just in a very low production era. And but I learned about the industry, and what attracted me was the history and potential. And so right out of college, right out of the University of Kentucky, I applied for a job here at Buffalo Trace, and in 1995, took the job. I was probably the first person they had hired in probably a decade. The distillery was pretty dilapidated. We didn't have a lot of work. We were running our bottling lines about twice a week, one line twice a week. We were looking for work. We were barely distilling anything. We were running about 5 or 6 months out of the year. And I asked Gary, I remember asking him, why are you hiring me again? Because it doesn't look like there's a lot of work going on. And luckily for me, I had a group of people here. There was about 50 people total. All those 50 people had been here for a long time, a lot of experience. I just saw the potential. And then we had Sazerac company bought us in the early 90s and really turned the culture around and turned the business around and got us back on track. And I saw that taking place, and we had to spend a lot of money at the distillery and invest and hire people. I mean, I think we're up to 600 people now at the distillery, and we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on expanding. And in those early years, it was nice to, as we were expanding, we were preparing for someday, growing the business and getting this distillery back up to where it used to be. And now we're beyond that. So we're making more whiskey here than we've ever seen, and every year we make a little bit more. So and no plans of slowing down. Really the turning point was when we acquired Old Charter and the Weller brand. I think that was in 1996 or 97. And when we acquired those two brands, it really opened the doors up for us, because it gave us different recipes and it gave us more of a demand for our bourbons. And of course, we created the Buffalo Trace label in 1999. And that was really the stepping off point of the old days and bringing into the new. And we were able to create that demand. And we started hiring salesmen. In 95, we had 6 salesmen for the entire world. And that covered I would talk to these guys and I'd say, what's your territory? And he would say, well, I've got 16 states to cover. And I would say, well, but there's no way for you to cover those, right? And he'd say, well, that's right, but they do the best they could, right? We only had 6 guys to cover the whole deal. Yeah, a day for me is, again, a lot of variety, that's for sure. But every day we look at product quality, yields, performance of the production, and those are the main highest priorities to make sure that things are getting done the way they're supposed to be. And then again, you've got a lot of projects in place for now that you have to look at progress on each of those, and I would say a lot of it is also development of the staff and the people involved with the distillery. I hold that as a pretty high priority to make sure everybody is developing properly and the skills are getting addressed. And again, as part of that succession planning, it takes years to make sure that's in place. So that's one of the important roles of the job, to make sure our team is, we have over 100 people at Buffalo Trace alone that we have to make sure are progressing. So that's a big part of it, but every day is a little bit different. That's what makes it nice. And I can say in the 27 years I've been here, I've never had the same day twice, that's for sure. But that's what makes it interesting. Yeah, whenever we do tastings, we get a lot of questions about, why can't you offer more Pappy? Why can't you have more 10-year-old? And what I'll say, especially say a 23-year-old, I say, 23 years ago, were you drinking Pappy? And most of the time they'll say, I didn't even know what Pappy was 23 years ago. I say, well, that's my point, is we plan based on the demand for today. And so if we've got a real strong demand on one of the brands, we'll plug that in and we'll figure out how much we need to make today in order for it to be ready in 10 years or 8 years, whatever the brands are. But what's happened over the years, the demand has grown faster in that 8-year window than we produced. And so we've just been allocating all of our brands, based on what we thought the demand was 8, 10, 23 years ago. We're planning future production for 2042, 2043, how much do we need to make? And we're basing it on today's demand. And we know we can sell more, so we're making more. And that's why we're doing all this investing. The numbers have been thrown out of $1.2 billion we're spending on capital investments across the Sazerac. And, I spent a lot of time with Elmer because, even though he retired in the 80s, he continued to promote the brands and the distillery. And so we did a lot of promotional work together, and we did a lot of events, and we would travel, and also personally, I would take him bass fishing. We had a lot of common interests. So we would do bass fishing and golf, and we went on a canoe trip one time, and we were going down this whitewater. Basically, we had no business being in this canoe. 2 distillers out in a canoe. We were not professional canoers, and the water was too fast. But anyway, we were going down through there, and I said, Elmer, we need to go to the left. Well, he paddles to the right, and we go right instead of left. I'm going left, and so we end up going straight. And we hit a root ball, and that canoe went up on the root ball and then just basically wrapped around that root ball because the current was so strong, and it threw us both out. I about got drowned on the root ball because my life jacket got hung on the root ball and it was taking me down, and he went underneath and he pops up about 75 yards down the rapids there, luckily for me, because I thought I'd done killed him. And of course, we saved our cooler full of drinks and food. We were worried about that. But anyway, we got another canoe. We wrung out our socks and got in it and continued on. He was probably about 80 years old at the time, and he was a good sport about it. But I couldn't help but thinking, I didn't want to be the one who killed Elmer, and a guy with all that history. So the first bourbon was made by accident, basically, by putting it in a charred barrel and shipping it down to Mississippi. And they received that product in New Orleans and said, why is it dark? Why is it picking up this color? And so those things got answered over time. People preferred it. And then there was an evolution of people saying, I like the aged stuff. And the reason it got aged up was because of Prohibition, and Prohibition created a little bit older products and people liked it. And so, now we're going to design something maybe a little older and try to mimic that. So it really just, and the inventory would age up and people figured out that they would like that. So if you look at all the awards and the competitions, the majority of the time, the older products will win those awards because people appreciate that balance of the wood and the balancing of the recipe with the wood and the sugars and the tannins and caramels are picking up from that. So, and that's been an evolution. It's not something that somebody designed from day one. So, for me, it's been a journey. We've been very fortunate to see the business grow, and I just want, it's really important for me to carry on that legacy. So we've had a legacy of distillers. I'm the 6th distiller since the Civil War, and I want to make sure that I hand that baton off to the next distiller in a little bit, hopefully, good shape, a lot of business, being able to continue right on, into the future. So that way I've done my part and, making sure that legacy is intact. So that's really important. And all the things that we've done are authentic and sound and really good products. Quality is top notch, and, we don't want any, chinks in our armor along the way, Yeah, there's definitely a sense of pride. If you walk through the distillery, any person walks through the distillery as a tourist, we've got 600 people here, and I would say without fail, all 600 work here for the pride of what they do. And you can feel that when you talk to the individuals, and including myself. But if you walk through the distillery, the whole team is focused on delivering a product that we can be proud of. It's good for Kentucky. It's good for the distillery. And I feel that when I go out into the marketplace, and I'll go to New York City and we go into a bar and we start, as soon as I walk in, we start talking about bourbon that we made in Kentucky, and they're asking me some background or, some history on the bourbon. I immediately start thinking about the people who made it, what all went into that, and what the corn looked like when we made it 8 years ago. It's kind of like a golf hole. I can remember that kind of stuff. And it's just fun to be able to connect. So wherever you're at in the world, it brings you back home. So you can taste that bourbon, and it's the stuff we made in our backyard. It's something every person here can be proud of that.